it's time to get to our grand finale. What you're about to see is a world premiere trailer that gives us a new look at an expansive world we can't wait to explore again.
No way.
This game comes from a studio that surprised the world and redefined the RPG genre.
No way.
I want to thank them for this trailer for one of gaming's most anticipated upcoming releases. The rumors were true.
No way, dude. Is this really happening? You piece of shit. In between huffs of Bloodborne hopium comes a little bit of Bloodborne copium, games that help scratch that itch just a little bit. And I don't think anything is set to get as close to the original experience aside from a direct sequel as Lies of P. I played the demo for this game last week. Sorry about this video going out so late, I'm traveling a lot right now, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit because I think what Round 8 Studios is building here deserves a lot of praise just for existing at this scope with this level of polish. There are some quirks to this game, it still can't quite nail the formula that From Software has damn near perfected, but I think it's a solid shot at being the best non-FromSoft Souls-like on the market, and it has plenty of ideas that I think are worth discussing. The full game comes out September 19th, it's gonna be on Game Pass. Let's talk about the demo. The first things about this game that feel immediately impressive are its visuals and performance. Souls-likes tend to look a little bit, gruff looking, not exactly top of the line graphically, obviously art direction aside, just purely on a technical level, and most of them tend to come with some performance issues. This includes nearly all of From Software's Soulsborne games as well, mind you. Bloodborne looks like it's being powered by a Tamagotchi, and Elden Ring isn't exactly the smoothest sailor either, so it's almost jarring to see a game like this that runs so well, especially at this scale with a team that's pretty unknown. Over the nearly 3 hours that this demo lasted, I don't think I saw a single frame drop. It was running buttery smooth on my PS5, the lighting and textures were on point, and moving on to some of the more artistic choices, the game's already shown off some cool action shots, fantastic varied environments, and great enemy design. Obviously that last thing is most noticeable with the bosses, whether it's from trailers or directly from this demo. I like the design of both main bosses that I fought, but even the regular enemies like burly, headless brutes and these dudes that look like old British police officers have a lot of personality. I can't wait to see all the weird animatronics they shove into this thing. Since all the enemies are animatronic, they tend to have interesting attack patterns. A lot of their swings have little pauses that you need to watch out for, and even if you're behind them and think you have an opening, they remind you that they don't have normally functioning joints and slap you around from behind. It doesn't feel unfair though, because usually you can see them kind of tire out and recover, and that's your real chance to get your hits in. I actually like the enemy behavior a lot because it's a little bit weird, but so far not unreadable. When I see attacks like the Scrapped Watchman's left-handed swing, which always comes out at a different cadence, but if you're paying close attention to his movements, you can still dodge it every time, that's how I know you've designed engaging enemy attacks. If you've watched me for a long time, you know that I'm a big fan of when games implement features that force you to be aggressive, and ground zero for this comes with how you design your health or posture meters. Bloodborne's rally system, Doom Eternal's glory kill, Wolong's spirit gauge, I love this stuff. Lies of P doesn't do anything in this realm that blows me away, but it does implement it to some extent. For example, blocking enemy attacks does do chip damage, but you can recover it exactly like Bloodborne's rally system, do some damage immediately after, get some of that lost health back. Bloodborne let you do it in response to any attack, but this game only lets you do it after a block, so it's not quite as key, but as an additional feature, Lies of P technically gives you an unlimited amount of healing as long as you stay in the fight long enough and get a few good licks in. You have a certain number of health items coming off from save points just like Estus flasks, but once you're out, your damage output gets linked to the recovery of one health item. So basically after doing enough damage, you get access to another heal, and if you use that, you're able to recover it again, rinse and repeat. It's not the most intuitive mechanic, but it's a very helpful one. You're never given too much of an advantage because you can only ever gain back one flask at a time, but you're also never out for the count when fighting anything. It's a nice addition. Generally, combat is very bloody, flashy, and cinematic while staying grounded. The finisher moves or backstab animations are great, the breadth of weapons seems very exciting, and if you swing at enemies who are blocking or perform enough perfect parries, you'll snap their blade in half and they just have to fight you with a little stump now. This stuff isn't necessary for the game to work, but it just adds a little extra flavor to the gameplay. If you put the hurt down on a boss or a tough enemy consistently, the game rewards you with massive damage opportunities that reward your aggression. It's usually this big show of flashy finisher moves that I'm sure we'll see variations on with more weapons at our disposal. On top of all your basic blocking, parrying, dodging, attacking, checklist stuff in combat, you're also given special moves for your weapons which can apply buffs or send out powerful attacks. These also charge up the more damage you do, and you have the Sekiro-like offhand fixed with a bunch of different abilities. In the demo, I think you only have access to the grapple tool. I might have missed something in my exploration, but I'm pretty sure it is just this. And while I didn't use it as much as I thought I would, it is nice to reel smaller enemies in, and I'm sure there'll be ways to upgrade this and make it even more viable in combat. We've also seen some really cool alternative attachments that I'm very excited to use. It did look like you might only be able to set up one tool at a time, which is a little annoying, but I don't think that's confirmed, so I'm gonna hold out hope that we'll be able to switch between a few on the fly. The last thing I want to touch on in this section is the handle and blade system. Basically, each weapon in this game is separated by its handle and its blade, and these can be mixed and matched to achieve different combinations. That means the scaling from a dex weapon can be applied to a blade which was initially intended for a strength build. The weapon's abilities, which are split into blade abilities and handle abilities, can be paired off in different configurations, and the handles themselves can be altered to scale with certain stats or apply different elemental damage. I think this is brilliant for build variety, and it really takes away from that FOMO you get when finding a weapon that you think looks fun only to have it collecting dust in your inventory because it doesn't match your build. There is so much about this game that makes it more than a Bloodborne clone, even just from a 3-hour demo that barely touches on some of its more ambitious mechanics, story, and world building, and I think it easily proved that it deserves to be taken seriously. But it's also not all perfect. They changed the donkey dialogue.
You can't sneak past me! Die!
You cunning rascal. You won't get through here, die.
Why would they do that? But on the real, of course this dialogue was a placeholder the last time it was shown, but the seemingly final dialogue here and all throughout this demo is a little bit weak.
Hello there. Welcome to Krat, visitor. I didn't think there were any stalkers left to fight the puppets.
It's probably the most amateurish feeling thing about this game. Most line deliveries sound very flat, and there's this weird post-processing effect that distorts most voices, which I think was meant to fit the whole robot aesthetic, but it kind of just sounds like a last-ditch attempt to add texture and grittiness to the performances that are clearly lacking those elements behind the effects. There are also some things this game takes from the From Software games that inspire it, which feel a little bit close for comfort, like how it basically copies and pastes a handmaiden into this hub world, or makes you fight the single worst enemy type in any Souls game ever made, dogs. But the one that bugged me the most was its controls. For some reason, it lifts not only the janky Soulsborne running controls, which requires you to hold the circle button, and in turn hold your controller like a crip if you want to turn the camera while running, but it also jacks the Soulsborne jumping controls, Dark Souls 3 specifically, where you need to be sprinting, again, while holding circle, and then press L3 to jump. How has any QA team on either of these games let this slide? So many other games like this, in fact ones that are even more complicated control-wise, have managed to give us a dedicated jump button or some other workaround. Elden Ring even gave us a dedicated jump button after years of jerking us around with the worst jumping controls known to man. I guess maybe it's because the jumps will be used so infrequently that the team thought they didn't need to waste a whole button on it, but I did find that the controls generally felt like they were from a Souls game of 7 years ago. There's one even bigger problem it has control-wise that I'll touch on in a sec. There's also a few elements of combat that I think really showcase this as a first attempt at a Souls-like, even if it is, in my opinion, a very good first attempt. The dodge is a little bit short and stiff feeling. It almost feels functionally similar to Sekiro's dodge, which is more used to get out of the way of attacks faster rather than actually dodge through or around them. But unlike Sekiro, the benefits of this game's parry aren't made immediately clear. You can parry in this game, but enemy posture, which does exist and does get knocked down with these parries, isn't explicitly shown to you, so you'd be forgiven for not realizing how useful it is as opposed to dodging. For seasoned players, parrying is definitely the way to go. It breaks weapons, does stamina damage, and lets you stay in close range and ward off unblockables, but I only realized most of that after the demo. It should have been communicated better. They also seem to have fallen into the circle strafe problem that a lot of old Souls games did, where you can kind of circle around enemies' sides and stay pretty clear of most attacks, even from bosses. And against smaller, slender enemy types, it's insanely easy to just get behind them and spam the backstab. You can fight enemies head-on and it's a lot of fun, but this is a somewhat consistent exploit that I've noticed at least early on, and if you give players the option to exploit your game, they're probably gonna do it. It's a sin I can personally forgive, but I can already see the lengthy Reddit posts from some Soulsborne fans talking about why this game's combat sucks in comparison to the almighty, all-knowing developer, and iframes and circle strafing will be at the center of those posts. Two other quick things I wanted to mention. I understand that Jiminy Cricket is part of the original tale of Pinocchio, but I still wish they hadn't made him a peppy, talkative companion like the Cuff in Forspoken. He's not nearly as grating or as prominently featured as the Cuff, but I still think it doesn't suit the style of this game. And the biggest thing I want to see changed is the controls for the healing, or at least the UI of it by the time the game releases. Because right now it's all too easy to perform a different action when you think you're about to heal. Basically, you can choose to put quick items into your upper belt or your lower belt. Both are shown to you at screen at once, and using the D-pad you can switch between them and press square to use the item that you're hovering over. But because there's just a subtle glow to indicate whether you're currently selecting the upper belt or the lower belt, you might see that the health flask icon is on screen and assume you have it selected, press square, and then it turns out you were actually on the other belt and you toss a rock or something instead. Maybe I'll get used to it, but I think it's a pretty big flaw in the UI because healing on the fly is kind of stressful and not having a clear indicator can screw you over. I'd like it if they sort of tucked the belt that isn't being used behind the other one, and when you switch they would flip around like this. That would be a nice little fix. Before Before we wrap this video up, I just wanted to go through some other stuff that isn't necessarily positive or negative, it's just some other stuff I wanted to cover. The level design, in my opinion, is very solid so far. Again, it feels head and shoulders above other Souls-likes. I think the atmosphere of the city is great, and even early on you're already hopping on rooftops or exploring half-broken pathways in search of one item that you'll never use the rest of the game, but there's still a layer of fakeness to all of this. I criticize this in Jedi Survivor a lot, where the levels were over-designed and didn't feel organic to explore because the pathways and shortcuts were too constant, random, and intrusive to feel like natural parts of the world. And to be clear, Lies of P is nowhere near as bad, but its levels do follow some pretty simple looping design, and it's never a mystery where to go. If it ever splits off into two paths, for example, chances are one path dead ends within 10 seconds. This kind of takes away from the ever-present sense of exploration in the Soulsborne games, but it also cuts down on confusion, and I see myself feeling less inclined to look at guides when the full game comes out. So depending on the type of player you are, you might like this or you might not. It's definitely not weak level design, it's just not as strong as the series that inspired it, but you never know what's up their sleeves in the final release. As much as I love the bosses and most of their attacks, I also think there's a bit of a canned nature to them. They will let out very telegraphed preset combos that never change or have multiple variations or anything, and then they'll recover for a moment and launch into another set of predetermined attacks. The first attack in a combo is also the easiest to dodge or parry, so you can pretty comfortably know exactly what's coming for you at all times, and you just need to make sure you handle it accordingly. I do hope later bosses have slightly more dynamic movesets that keep you guessing, because everything else about them is great, but I have a feeling this is going to be the norm throughout the game. It's going to make for some fun bosses, but I don't think any that'll take too long to master and understand. I also want to note that Lies of P has its own combat pace that doesn't quite fit with its #1 comparison in Bloodborne. This is not as fast-paced, the dodge isn't as quick or as long, you can block in this game, the parry isn't the ultimate risk-reward move, it's a standard posture-damaging parry that has a long window. Do not expect this to play identical to Bloodborne or any other direct Soulsborne game, this does feel a bit different. I've yet to make up my mind on the durability system in this game, where weapons degrade somewhat quickly when you use them and you need to sharpen them during fights sometimes to keep them from breaking. On one hand, it's not taking any finite resources, so it's not as annoying as most breakable weapon systems, but on the other hand, you need to do it mid-battle most of the time. Jury's still out on this one. And finally, moving away from combat, I want to know what the lying system in this game entails. Obviously, because Lies of P is based off the tale of Pinocchio, there is going to be lying involved, and they've said that it'll change elements of the world and shape the story, but I want to see how that actually works. Personally, I never thought stuff like world tendency or dragon rot affected my experience too much. I understand what they're doing, I just never cared enough about the systems for them to really affect me. So I wonder if this will be another somewhat empty system or something a little bit more interesting. I wanted to just add something in here really quick before the video ends. Because I was traveling, enough time lapsed in making this video that the dev team has done a Q&A for the demo that addressed a few criticisms from the players. Namely, they've noted that they're going to be tweaking the dodge and iframes a bit. They're also going to be making the offbeat attack patterns a bit more intuitive. I hope that doesn't mean they'll be smoothing them out too much, because I really did enjoy this aspect. And they've also talked about why they stuck to certain decisions that some people might be criticizing, like only letting you level up at Hotel Krat instead of any checkpoint. It's great to see them do this. I think it's yet another sign that this game is just going to be a really quality release when it comes out, but I will say this is probably going to lead to a bit more work than they envisioned, so I could see the game slipping in release by a month or two. After playing Lies of P for 3 hours or so, I can safely say that while it has a few rough edges, it is an incredibly impressive game that I hope scales well in its full release. There's so much potential here, so many good ideas, big and small, and they've managed to capture a lot of what makes the Soulsborne games great, even if they can't quite nail some aspects. They do replace those deficiencies with some great additions of their own, though. I cannot wait for this game to come out in a few months. Sorry again for this video being late, I've been really busy, but I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did, join the Discord, it's in the description, and I'll see you all next time. Peace.